Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Her hafta farklı ülkelerden, farklı milletlerden konuklarla bölgesel ve küresel meselelere dair farklı perspektiflere yer vermeye çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta yeni okuduğum ve çok etkilendiğim bir kitabın yazarıyla konuşacağız. Nijeryalı yazar Abi Dare'nin Sesim, Duyulana dek isimli kitabı Türkçe'ye bu başlıkla çevrildi. Roman Batı Afrika ülkesi Nijerya'da geçiyor. Nijeryalı genç bir kızın yoksulluk, çocuk yaşta evlilik, eğitim hakkından yoksunluk gibi zorluklarla dolu trajik ama aynı zamanda ilham verici öyküsünü konu ediniyor roman. Uluslararası çapta da epey ses getirmiş bir roman. Epsilon Yayınevi tarafından kısa bir süre önce Türkçe'ye kazandırıldı. Bu hafta hem bu kitabı hem de bu kitap etrafında Nijerya'yı, Nijerya'nın sorunlarını konuşacağız. Yazar Abi Dare bizlerle. Welcome, Abi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, this is your book in Turkish. Let me show you first.
It's beautiful.
It is, yes. First of all, congratulations. Your novel, The Girl with the Loading Voice, has recently been published in Turkish. The title in Turkish is Sesim Duyulana dek, so literally means until my voice is heard.
That's lovely.
The novel tells the story of a teenage Nigerian girl called Adunni, struggling with so many things, lack of education, child marriage, poverty, and her ability to speak up for herself. So let me start with the obvious question. Is Adunni a real person? I really wonder, because it attracted my attention that at the end of your novel, you thank a person with the name of Adunni. So is that person your inspiration to write this novel?
Right, Aduni is a fictional character. She's not real.
Okay.
But her story came to me as though the character were fully formed and very real. It felt like she was walking behind me in the kitchen as I was trying to figure out what to do with the story. But it also is a story of many girls that I knew growing up in Nigeria that were born into poverty, that worked as housemaids for families around me, and telling that story in a way, I think it came from a confluence of bringing together of all the little girls and boys that I'd seen growing up and trying to create and tell the stories of where they'd come from through Aduni's voice.
Wow.
So she's not real,
I
but
see.
I thought I had to thank her.
I see. Okay. Abi, before I will ask some more details about your childhood, if you allow me to ask. But before I do, I want to ask how representative how typical is Adunni's tragic yet inspiring story? Is she an exception in Nigeria, or does her story tell us the difficulties and challenges an ordinary Nigerian girl faces?
That's a very interesting question. I think Aduni's story is, I wouldn't say typical of every Nigerian girl, but it is a story of, I would say, a good half of the population that are born into poverty and have no access to education. And indeed, the story of over how many millions of girls that are out there today in the world that have been denied an education for various reasons. I think there are families that can afford to educate their daughters and sons and do put them through school. But in the case of Aduni, her story reflects the poverty levels, particularly within the rural areas, of young girls and boys that are taken out of education or completely denied an education. So yes.
So mainly, it's a typical story in rural Nigeria, we can say that.
Absolutely, and where there is extreme poverty.
Mm-hmm. Abi, I think your mother is also the first female professor of taxation in Nigeria, Teju Somorin, and you dedicated this book to her. Well, her life must be quite a story also. After reading your novel, I can imagine the difficulties she went through. So how did she inspire you? Could you tell us a bit more about your mother, her own experience, and her impact on you since childhood?
So my mother was born into a family that had, I would say, relative comfort, relative wealth. Her father believed very much in the power of educating the girl child. And so she was educated, and she then chose to pursue a career in taxation, which at the time when she was pursuing it, I think even up until now, is mainly dominated by men. And so she found it's a lot of a struggle to get her voice heard and to rise to the top. But my mother is resilient. And I think she's impacted me a lot in the way that she has been resilient in her career, in fighting to be heard, in rising to the top of her career, and also in the way she chose to write books. And so I believe, right, that where she was not heard by using her voice in boardrooms and board meetings, she chose to write books. And it was in the writing of books. My mother has written over 130 publications on taxation.
Wow.
It was in the writing of these books that she became very recognized and was then conferred the opportunity to be a professor of taxation, the first female professor of taxation in Nigeria. And so she always says to me that you have a power to use your voice in different ways. And if you're silenced by not being able to speak out, you can use your pen. And often the pen is mightier than actually the spoken word.
So why didn't you write your mother's own story, by the way? Or have you ever planned?
I might, but I think you'll be very, very academic. My mother is very academic, very studious. And so she does have some interesting happenings that have happened in her life. But I think she's one of those people that just focused really hard on her career. And talking about how she's impacted me, I believe that from a very young age, seeing her as a woman in a male-dominated profession and seeing her continue to fight and struggle to be heard, and her telling me that I could be anything I wanted to become, especially when I left Nigeria to study in the United Kingdom. She said, look, you're going to a different country. You might face challenges culturally, economically, in any way. You need to continue to pursue your dreams and not give it up. And I think that followed me all through. And even when I was writing the book, I kept hearing her voice saying, don't give up and keep writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so she always encouraged you. But what about her own family, I wonder? I mean, her own family also, I think, encouraged her. But it must be very difficult, especially in the past. We are probably talking about like 30 years ago or more. So how was it? Was it different, more difficult or easier in the past compared to today?
I think it was. I think it was for her. I think it was harder. Like I said, I mean, especially with taxation, she did not pick the typical female profession as at that time,
yes,
which was many women were, where many women were choosing to be homemakers, where there's nothing wrong in doing that. But she wanted to work in an office. She wanted to impact policy and make changes and make a major difference. And so in that aspect, I think her family really didn't hold her back, because they allowed her to study and pursue all these degrees. I've lost count of how many degrees that she has. But I think within the professional environment, I think that was where it was harder, having to sit in a boardroom full of men and you wanted to say something and not given an opportunity to say it all the time. I think that was harder than anything else for her, and her refusing. And she retired after 35 years as the third to the chairman of the organization, so which was very good for her.
Is she an activist or something right now? I'm really wondering. Next time I should have an interview with her as well, by the way. Please arrange me an interview with her.
I think you should. She's very much, I think, when it comes to economics and taxation within Africa, within Nigeria, my mother is a voice to contend with and to hear. She's constantly impacting on policy, advising the government and the economic sort of forums on how to make a difference with the kind of taxation policies that we're putting into place. So she's very strong there, and that's where her passion lies. Wow,
yeah, she should be very strong, because, taxation is a very, as you said, it's also a very sensitive topic, because especially if we are talking about a country that has some level of, corruption and so on. So that should be also extra challenging for her, I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So anyway, we are coming back to your novel. So Abi, based on your novel, I can easily conclude that the Nigerian society is an extremely patriarchal one. What are its sources, though, I wonder? Is it still a tribal society, or is it the religion? So what are the sources, you think, according to you? What do you think?
I think it's hard to pinpoint one single source. Nigeria is a very ethno-religious, and there are over 250 ethnic groups which have different belief systems. There are many different religions, predominantly Muslim and Christian, but there are also different religions as well to contend with. So I think that the patriarchy sort of permeates across all of those things. But I would say that there has been a lot of improvement coming from maybe in my mother's time to where I am today, where I was looking at information the other day that some of the top economic institutions in Nigeria, the banks, are run by women now. So there has been a lot of improvement. But that said, around tradition, around some cultural practices, such as widowhood rights, such as female genital mutilation, such as childhood marriage, in some states within Nigeria, as you know, there are over 36 states in Nigeria. Not every single one of them has the same law. So I think around that, there is a lot of challenges to ensure that the patriarchy has, come to a level where women are heard. I think there's a long way to still go in that aspect.
Abby, I wonder, how is the government tackling with the issue, with all these problems in the society? Are the laws progressive enough, you think? For example, are there feminist groups working to improve the conditions of women in Nigeria?
It's interesting. I think that there have been women groups that have been speaking up against these things from time immemorial. If you look at the Yoruba culture, there were times that some of the women were the ones that went to war and fought the war. That said, I still think that there's a long way to go, particularly these days with the advent of social media. Voices are being heard louder. We can call the attention of global organizations to stand up for us and hear our voices. So I think that there's a lot of feminist groups that are doing great jobs and are continuing to do that. But I think, like everything, there is a lot of room for improvement within that space. So we'll continue to watch and see, but it's not where it was, say, 30 years ago.
I see. So you say there's an improvement comparing to the past.
Yes, I believe there is.
Do you believe in terms of international pressure or the role of international community? What do you think it should be? I mean, it should be more like a local effort, or there should be some international pressure? What do you think about this, Abby? I wonder.
I think the world is a global village now, right? And I think that there is no single state or country where there's a bit of crisis, that if they get their voices out there, that the international world will not stand up to it. So where Nigeria is, I think I don't know the exact number of how many millions of Nigerians are on Twitter, but if you just look at the amount of millions of Nigerians on Twitter today, they're getting their voices heard. I think Bring Back Our Girls is a typical example of where the international community stood up and fought with us to ensure that those girls that were kidnapped from school in 2014, that their voices were heard, that people stood up to ensure that there could be at least some investigation into looking at what happened to those girls. So I think that there is a lot of support, and as always, I always say there's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm. In your novel, you also describe vividly the life of other Nigerians, rich Nigerians. Was this intentional, or was it just to point out something that bothers you about your country? Or let me put it this way: how deeply divided and extremely structured is the Nigerian society? Could you please tell us more about the society?
I think that talking about the wealth, for me, was intentional. And one of the reasons why I did that was I know that there's a lot of press and media attention around the poverty in Nigeria, which is the absolute truth. But I also believe that there is a danger when there's only one lens through which you're viewing a society, and has always been around poverty and corruption. I wanted to tell a story of the wealthy Nigerians that not many people knew about, but also to show that, look, we're talking about a nuanced environment here. So in Aduni's case, she comes from extreme poverty and finds herself in a part of the world, in a part of Nigeria she never knew existed, which is the wealthy aspect. But in so doing, she also realizes that these wealthy women who are educated and have everything she wants to have still face certain challenges as women to be able to get their voices heard. So I think that's why I did that. In terms of how divided it is, I think talking from my own experience in childhood growing up, it was pretty clear that there was a wide gap between the poor and the rich, and that the middle class was slowly disappearing, eroding. Mm-hmm. And I've always found that quite fascinating, the divide between the wealthy and the poor, if I can use that, and just seeing how it continues to be a problem even till today. So I think it's very divided when you look at the economic, the socioeconomic sort of statuses of people.
And I think that gap is even further. I mean, it's even more divided now due to the pandemic. I think after the pandemic, that gap is also even more widened. What do you think? The impact of the pandemic?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you look at education, which is an aspect that I'm very passionate about. During the pandemic, I had friends who were like me, who have middle-class families and are making their own money and doing reasonably well. It wasn't a problem for their children to continue to go to school. They went online and had teachers on the other end of the computer teaching them. But imagine a girl like Aduni who comes from a rural village. Even to get to a brick and mortar school is a problem without a pandemic. Now imagine if there's a pandemic and such a girl has no access to teaching, no access to computers. What then happens? This is a girl that her parents did not, well, her father in this case, did not believe she should get an education. And so such a girl in the pandemic is often predisposed to what? Marriage. Go get married. There's no point in you getting an education anymore anyway. And so that, I think, is a very, very sad thing that has, I believe, set back the poor, people that have no access to education, many years. That it will take a long time. I don't even think we understand the impact yet in terms of what the pandemic has done to girls.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Abi, it doesn't seem to be your main concern in the novel, but I came across some references in your novel to politics. As you also mentioned, it is a fact, Nigeria is an oil-rich country. How is oil money spent? Is politics simply too corrupted in Nigeria? And are the masses too powerless to bring any change in the political system?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I would love to know how the oil money is spent, to be honest. I know that it's distributed within the states, but I would say that as someone who's been to one or two of the states in Nigeria, sometimes it's hard pressed to see where that money is going into. We hear about it, we hear how wealthy the country is, but it's difficult to see where it is going into. In terms of politics and how corrupt it is, I would say that it's come a long way. I would say that, you know, our elections are potentially probably the most transparent it's been in recent times. I mean, there were times where there was a lot of, as I heard, I mean, I was young then, but I would hear about all sorts of corruption going on with ballot boxes and all of that. But I think that has changed a lot now with the introduction of technology, with the fact that the international world is watching, with the fact that people have mobile phones now and can actually record what is going on at election centers. But also the fact that the young are empowered now because, social media, people are speaking to each other more quickly and often. People are empowered to get up there and say, I want to be elected. I want to make a change. People are leaving UK, US and going back to Nigeria to make a change. And so going to your final question around the masses empowered, I think this is the best time for the masses to be empowered to do a lot more. We can. I think many of us don't realize just how empowered we are. Look at 2020 where we had the NSARS movement. It was a group of young people that said, no, enough of police brutality in Nigeria. They began to make a lot of noise before we knew what was going on. It was picked up across the world and aired on televisions across the world. So that tells you how empowered the masses are. And because there's an election coming up, I say to every young person out there, every human being out there that believes in the future of Nigeria to get up and pick up their voter's card and go out there and vote and make a change for the right person to come in.
So young people are optimistic and hopeful about the future then?
We are. We've always been.
Yes. Abi, your novel has been translated into different languages. It received many awards, became a New York Times bestseller. What makes it so appealing to people in different countries and societies, you think? And also, I wonder, how was it received in your home country, Nigeria? How was the reaction?
I'm very grateful for the support and the love that the book has had. I call it love. And I don't know if it's, I think the themes in the book are themes that a lot of people have heard of, you know, child marriage and all of that. You see it every day. But I think it's this human story behind the themes that I was talking about, that I'm talking about in the story. It's the story of Aduni, a young girl. I think what I was trying to achieve when I was writing this story was to try to get into the head of some of the girls that I knew growing up. These girls had no voices. Nobody knew who they were. Sometimes you didn't even know their date of birth or their surnames, but they were working for your families. And so what I wanted to do was to get this girl's voice heard. And I hope that that's what has tugged at the heartstrings of the people reading the story and are sharing it across the world. And I'm grateful for that. I think that's a really wonderful thing. In terms of how the story was received in Nigeria, So far, I've had a lot of positivity, which is great. I've had a few people say that they will try to make an impact within the parliament, the lawmakers who are saying, what can we do to ensure that when we say there is a law against child labor, that we enforce that law? And when we say in states that have enacted the child marriage law, that we ensure that that law is actually enforced. And so hearing things like that has been very encouraging to me. But it's been a mixed reaction, but mostly positive. I'm grateful for that.
Very good. Good to hear that. Abby, how does your work fit into the landscape of Nigerian and broader African literature, by the way? How does it stand out?
I just hope it a lot of great writers have gone ahead and done amazing things. And when I was writing The Girl with the Loud Voice, I hoped to be at least, even if it was a tiny drop in this ocean of intelligence that is out there in terms of African literature. And I hope that's just what it is, that it's a drop. And as you know, little drops becomes, an ocean as well. So hopefully more stories will continue to contribute to that landscape that is very rich right now.
Also, I want to ask you, some critics of literature from Africa decry the continued depiction of poverty, illness, war, conflict, often shown in literature about Africa. And I guess same thing applies to cinema as well. Africa is always, or most of the time, portrayed, like negatively and all about these issues like war, conflicts, as I said, poverty. So do you share this concern with the critics?
I do, and yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I do, and I did write in The Girl with the Loud Voice, but I think I would have done a disservice to telling the story of this young girl without showing the extreme poverty she came from. I think what we need to do as storytellers, as filmmakers from Africa, is to tell a nuanced and balanced story, as opposed to trying to sort of feed the attention of the media around just the poverty. Yes, there is poverty, there's no denying that, but there's also a lot of richness. And I think I try to do that by bringing out some of the facts about Nigeria and some of the things that Aduni herself saw when she moved from poverty into wealth. The fact that there is wealth and there is all these other things doesn't remove the fact that there are challenges, right? So I think it's important to have a nuanced view when telling stories. And I hope I did that and I continue to do that.
Please do so. By the way, any plan to write new novels? Because I think The Girl with the Loud Voice is your debut novel. So any plans for the future, for the near future?
I hope so. I mean, writing a novel can be a bit of a work. So we'll see how it goes.
I mean, are you working on anything these days? If it's not too personal? I'm trying to. We've been through a pandemic. I'm trying to homeschool 2 daughters. I'm trying to remember what life was like before then. So in the midst of all of that, I'm trying to put something together. I see. Okay. Well, you should come to Turkey to make a book launch.
I would love to.
That would be great. So hope to see you next time in Istanbul.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abby. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, congratulations with the book. Let me show you one more time the book in Turkish. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evet, Saat Farkı'nda bu hafta bu kitabı ve kitabın Nijeryalı yazarını tanıtmış olduk. Epsilon Yayınevi tarafından geçtiğimiz haftalarda yayınlanan yeni bir kitap Sesim, Duyulana dek. Nijerya'nın pek çok sorununu anlatıyor ama aynı zamanda umut veren de bir öykü, bir roman. Herkese okumasını tavsiye ederim. Bu hafta böyle Nijerya'ya uzandık ve oradaki sorunları konuşmuş olduk. Yazar Abi Dare ile önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşçakalın.